what's amazing to me about what the book brings out is the broad array of subjects that Gerstner was, at least conversant with. So a question about Van Til and Gerstner, because and this is early on in his career. He interacts some with Van Til's book, The New Modernism. You have page 48 of your book brings that out. Maybe I can. Obviously, Gerstner and Van Til had their differences on apologetic method, but I think Gerstner and Van Til had at least this in common. I mean, they had a lot more in common, I think, than they had not in common. And one of the things that they had in common was a mutual concern about the theology of Karl Barth. So, how did while Gerstner may have disagreed with Van Til, I guess on apologetics, was Gerstner at all um, appreciative of Van Til's work on Barth? And how did Gerstner view Van Til's read of Karl Barth? Maybe that's a good way to put the question to you.
I think for Gerstner, and many, people who are evangelicals in the mainline church, they see Van Til, as an ally, as someone who's an Orthodox Christian, um, even though they may disagree, on apologetic method and so forth. But I do, thinking back on this issue, I think that Gerstner felt that maybe um, Van Til went a little bit too far in his criticisms of Karl Barth. I think Gerstner would definitely want to criticize Barth in many ways, but maybe he felt that Van Til took it a little too far and didn't recognize some of the positive things coming out of Karl Barth and his theology. Um, so I think that's kind of how he looked at it. Um, he did, obviously work. He worked with Karl Barth's son at Pittsburgh Seminary. Karl Barth's son was a professor of theology at Pittsburgh Seminary,
Marcus,
and
right?
Marcus Barth. And Marcus was somewhat helpful and sympathetic to John Gerstner on the faculty, and Gerstner had very few allies, on the faculty. So it is somewhat interesting that Marcus Barth was more sympathetic to John Gerstner's concerns. So, but obviously, um, maybe one way to think about it is. So, like Harold Lindsell's Battle for the Bible. Carl Henry said that was like, theological atom bombing or whatever, and that Lindsell, took it a little bit too far in his critique, and so maybe that's a way to compare how Gerstner felt about Van Til's critique of Barth.